and start on this new side. And I know that I've got about 4 hours. Well, I can tell my whole history, in that length of time. And the way I've got it recorded now, I've just got snatches of my history here and there and everywhere. And you kids wouldn't know how to put it together because you don't know when one happened, when the other happened. But now I'd like to start in when I start on this other side. And I'll start in from the time I was a boy. When I first remember the first things that I remember about my life. And then I'll keep going it right on down as I grow older and tell the things that happened while I was that age, see? And then I'll finally finish it up by, down in Mexico and the revolution and coming back out here and then telling about how I'm finishing up here, see? Then you got the whole thing. And it's chapter after chapter. But the way it is now, I just told certain things that happened one time, certain things that happened another. Well, I know when they happened, but you folks wouldn't know. So that's what I'd like to do.
Because I don't remember when you were where you were when you were a boy. This is real.
No,
no.
Real. Well, you see, I grew up in, let's say, started right out traveling before I was born. I could tell about my father and mother left Utah where we were living in Richfield.
And how old were you when you were in Richfield?
Well,
this is before you were born.
This is before I was born. See, that my father and mother was living in Richfield. And my sister was born there. She was older than I. She was the first one of the family, see. It was Ida. You never knew her. She died. And then father started and left Richfield in his covered wagon and full of horses. And we went down to St. George, and they went through the temple in St. George, see? My mother was pregnant with me when she went through the temple. So I've often said I went through the temple before I was born, see? Well, then they went off over into New Mexico, where Dad was going, where I had an uncle over there that had a job work on the railroad. And Dad was going there to where he could work, and while we were there working on the railroad, why, I was born, see? And then, that was in Burnham, New Mexico. And then we moved from there and went up to Mancos, Colorado. You know where Mancos is, not very far from where you live, though. And then we moved down to...
No, you were born in New Mexico?
Yeah, I was born in New Mexico. A place called Fruitland, or it was called then, it was called, what we called it? No.
Oh, Fruitland is still there.
Fruitland, well, that's where I was at. I was born the closest to that of any other town, so that was where I was supposed to have been registered, but I wasn't registered. I was born right out on the railroad. We were working there on the railroad, and while Mother was there with Father, we were just living in a tent, and I was born there. And so when Dad finished that job there, then he moved over to Mancos, Colorado. It's not too far out from where you live there. And we lived in Mancos then for a year or two, and then we moved to Moab. You know where Moab is.
Oh, you lived in Moab? Huh?
Yeah, so then I lived in Moab.
That's only 80 miles.
Yeah, and Oscar was born there in Moab. Yeah. And Ed was born in Mancos, so, the kids was born just in different towns. And then we left Moab and went back to Richfield. where Dad started from, see. And by that time, I was 6 years old. He'd been gone 6 years around these other towns, see. So he got back to Richfield when I was 6 years old, and I lived in Richfield until I was 12 years old, and then Father starts on the trip down to Mexico.
Do you remember anything about your grandparents? They were still over in
Oh yes,
country?
no, my grandparents were living in Richfield.
Oh,
They were living there.
what was he doing? Farming?
Well, yeah, he had a little farm, and he farmed there. And Mother's father and mother lived there too. So I knew both my grandparents on both sides. My mother's father and mother. I got his second name. His name was Andrew Johnson. Mother was a Johnson, so she married my dad. And so she named me after Dad. Dad's name was Jim, so I was called James Andrew Jesperson. Well, then when we went back to Richfield again, why, his father and mother, they were living there, and they weren't following Dad around because Dad was just going every place, you know. So after Dad had wandered around for 6 years and we landed back again in Richfield, well, then we lived in Richfield then for 6 years till I was 12 years old. And by that time, then Dad wanted to go to Mexico. So then we left Richfield and we started out. So that's what I'll do. I'll just follow my life around that way and then just take it all the way. And as we went down to Mexico, well, when we got over into Arizona, my dad's horses were all getting poor and worn out, and he knew that we'd have to stop and let our team pick up a little bit, as we called it, you know, so that we'd be able to go on our journey. And so we stopped in a little town called Woodruff. It's over there in Arizona. And we lived there a while, and then we moved up to another little town called Concho, and we lived in Concho a while. And then we went from Concho over into St. John's, and we lived in St. John's a while.
What did he do when he stopped? I mean, how did he make a living?
Well, Dad was a stonemason. See, he was a stonemason, and all the houses in those days had a rock foundation under them, see. They didn't have cement, and they just used rocks. And Dad had learned how to lay up a rock foundation. And he also had the art of building a fireplace that wouldn't smoke. The trouble in those days, there wasn't too many fellows that knew how to build a fireplace that wouldn't smoke. If you got a darn fireplace, you know, that would puff out smoke into your house, first thing you know, it would burn all right for a little while, and then all of a sudden, the smoke would come back down the chimney and come into the room, you know. Well, Dad learned the